What's up, guys? I'm SaltEMike, and this is your post-CitizenCon week in review, not just your Star Citizen week in review. And because of that, it was a really hectic week, lots of things to talk about. Today's going to be more of like an overview video. There's going to be kind of just touching on subjects rather than really deep diving into them like we tend to do on this show. So getting right into it, we're going to start with the patch notes. We did get a patch this week. We had 3.7.2 go from the PTU to live. So we've talked mostly about the patch notes there, so not much to talk about here other than the fact that they added the Anvil Pisces, which is the ship that comes with the Carrack. Other than that, it was mostly bug fixes, things like cargo shows up now, VoIP fixes, as well as some Area 18 issues. So moving on to roadmap updates, they kind of hit me for a curve here, so if this video comes out a little bit late, this is one of the reasons why, on top of the fact that there's tons of information. They were updating the roadmap today because they didn't do it on Friday because of the lead up to CitizenCon. So starting out before this roadmap update, they made a post on the forums about some of the 3.8 ships being delayed, as well as ships like the Pisces coming in and the Argo Mole. So the Argo Mole was added. This is a new ship that's coming in 3.8. If you haven't checked out my video yet, I did just post it on the video before this. It's what we know right now as of the recording of this video, since they haven't posted the panel from CitizenCon up on their YouTube channel yet. The Cutlass Red is going to release probably in like a 3.8.1 in January, and the Anvil Carrack won't be live until February. Then the Prowler, which we talked about last week that there was a lot to do, won't be released until March, and I believe March is a month where we get another patch, so maybe the Prowler's moved to 3.9, although the roadmap doesn't display that. So getting into roadmap updates, they updated again, like I said, today. The Pisces was put on 3.7 as complete. The Mole is in 3.8 and it's 62% done, so kind of one of those surprise ships there. But everything else is kind of slow paced with like one project completed or one task completed, but like some of them have like 2 more added on. So I usually lean on the Reddit community as well as the like guys that work on the roadmap stuff. So StarCitizenLive.de or sclive.de, like those guys. So when those guys come out with some more, maybe I'll give you some more information on next week's week in review. So moving on to CitizenCon, this is the big updates here, and I'm pretty excited for it. And they did things a little bit differently this year. So they did an opening keynote where they like start an adventure, and then they do all their panels in between, and then do the closing keynote, which was like the completion of that. I didn't like the breakup, to be honest, but at the same time, it was quite a long mission, so maybe the breakup would have been good, and maybe I would have thought the actual keynote was more boring than I thought it was if it was like the full length of almost 2 hours. So maybe it was a good idea, maybe it wasn't, but definitely different, so cool. So they start out with the Carrack Commercial, which was lacking in Carrack, in my opinion. I think a lot of people agreed with that. I'm also maybe like becoming desensitized to their video content and their art, and not as appreciative of it as I probably should be. It's amazing, but I'm assuming I just don't appreciate it as much as someone that's new to the game, because I mean, it was a quite incredible commercial, but it was one of those things where it didn't just blow my mind or anything. So moving into the actual keynote event, they are basically doing a mission, and it's you wake up in your have, and right away Todd Pappy kind of blows my mind a little bit. He says you will have to eat and drink to stay alive, which was wild. So we'll let kind of we'll use Todd's words here.
We had coffee in the last CitizenCon demo. So
yeah. Well, again, this plays towards our actor status, which we'll get into a little bit later, where you will have to eat, you will have to drink stuff to stay alive. Again, we're not trying to make it so that you have to do it every hour or anything like that, but it is part of survival.
So the fact that you like will have to eat is still mind-blowing to me. This is something, maybe I completely missed it. Let me know if they've mentioned this before. They've definitely mentioned survival mechanics before, but more on like a buff and debuff situation, so this is somewhat new to me. But yeah, again, maybe reference me. I try to reference you guys in the video links. Reference me to anything that would link to the whole survival mechanics if I missed anything in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Then they go into this new mission here that I mentioned earlier, and it's a big one, 100,000 credit mission, and it seems to have multi-parts and be quite complicated. So I find that to be interesting. A lot of people have complained about the price or rewards for a lot of the missions that we have in Star Citizen, so pretty interesting there. Then we move on to something that really, really excites me, and this is the new orbital stations and the fact that they had one outside of another planet.
We introduced space stations around orbit, around the planets. They will have hubs and basically other shops and all of that. So that will roll out with 3.8. So every planet, Lorville, ArcCorp, Microtech, and then obviously we have Port Alisar.
So yes, this is really exciting. Having HABs on orbital stations around planets is big. We don't have to go in and out. I mean, I think for certain commodities maybe, or certain missions, sure, but you don't have to if you don't want to, and I think that's really cool. So having shops there around every planet, no need to land and leave atmosphere, and the idea that the orbital stations would be more like an airport, like hotel, and your actual hab where you live would have to be on a planet or moon, is realistic and exciting and more along the scale of what Star Citizen will be and what it should be. So very, very exciting there. And then they go into a look at like the biome from a distance, and this is really, really exciting. This is something that was related to the Planet V4 tech that we read in like monthly reports and other things that we talked about here on Week in Review. So it was really cool to see the different biomes from a distance, and you can truly tell which biome is which from atmosphere. Or from outside atmosphere, actually. And then as they come down to the planet, you see that there is an approach from outside of New Babbage, and they start talking about how you can pretty much land anywhere. There's different locations around the city where there's actual land, and they're doing their best to kind of take away the no-fly zones that have caused so many issues with blowing us up and all that stuff in the past. So it's nice to see that those are likely going away. And then they talked a little bit more about the New Babbage spaceport and how it was around this huge lake or ocean, frozen ocean, and they kind of scanned across the actual moon, or excuse me, the planet of Microtech to find a location where civilization would actually put something. So I found that really cool. It's 2 times the capacity of previous spaceports, the New Babbage spaceport. And personally, it's really hard to tell what we're going to get in 3.8 of this, because we're getting the exterior of Microtech and the exterior of New Babbage, but I think that likely just means like the spaceport and not necessarily the inside part of the city. But we'll have to see in future Inside Star Citizens, Star Citizen Lives leading up to 3.8, as well as like any PTU patches coming in the near future. And then they talk about the actor status system, and they went like kind of pretty deep-ish into this, and it was pretty cool.
And so one thing that we'll get into later, but we have the player status system is now extending beyond oxygen into temperature. As you can see that it's cold. I don't know if you noticed, but we are actually have breath coming out of our mouth.
From one zone to another zone.
So it's not just atmosphere anymore, it's now temperature involved, and they kind of show it on the HUD with the breath, and we'll see a little bit more of that later in the keynote. So the last thing that they do show was AI improvements, and this was pretty cool, where an AI ship landed on a landing pad. AI that were inside of the ship got out of their seats, got out and walked out, and we go in. And that ship takes off and completes, or that task of the mission for us, and continues the mission on where we don't have to fly at all. And that's pretty strong. We've had not great AI in Star Citizen for quite some time, so any improvement, any update to them is quite exciting. And then moving on from that, we go, we're going to skip ahead. We're going to skip through all the panels for this section of the video, and we're going to go straight to the closing keynote, so everything is kind of clear and fresh in your mind. So Chris gets on stage and starts out right away with a similar thing to what they did last year at CitizenCon, which was like the road to release roadmap. And he goes through the progress that they made last year, which was like OCS, procedural planet tech, purchases and rentals, quality of life, staggered dev, which they're just kind of starting now. And he also mentioned that they're still working on something very important to us.
And we're slowly working on aspects of the gameplay, in terms of, say, the feel of flight or the feel of combat.
So they're not satisfied with the feel of flight and combat, and we aren't either. So, that isn't enough for me just yet. I really want to see some tangible changes and some actual discussions with us about what the plans are and what we can expect for combat in the future. But anything they say about it is something, at least. It's better than nothing. And then he goes into what's next, so what's coming from this point forward, and he kind of drops a slight bomb. I think people overreacted to this a little bit, so I want to talk to you guys about this fully after we watch the clip.
This is what's coming up next. So in 3.8, we are going to have the very first iteration of server-side OCS. So we have server persistence in the session of the server. So the server, whenever it leaves an area, it streams stuff out. It remembers the state of all the items and all the stuff that was there at that time, but it doesn't persist beyond the server session. The bigger thing, which we've talked about in the future, is sort of the iCache, which is the full persistence.
Bam. SOX is in 3.8. Everybody, confetti started flying. It was insane, but it was version 1. And I think a lot of people overreacted and got really excited. And it is something to be excited about. So I listened to this over and over again, and I'll do my best to explain it how I understand it. So what SOX version 1 means is actually like persistence, sort of. Obviously, it will stream in and out things, but it's more important that they don't have full persistence yet. Therefore, server-side OCS can't really progress without it. So the persistence is for a server session only. So as soon as you leave an area or moon of planet, or a planet, like let's say I quantum travel from Hurston to, let's say, ArcCorp, and there's nobody playing in that Hurston area anymore, they will stream out that planet, and they will kind of save what happened on that planet. Everything that's there should be saved for the time being. So if I left my ship somewhere in a forest on Hurston, I should be able to go back to it during my server session or during a server session. So if the server crashes, that server session is now over. So not too much has changed from what we have now, other than the fact that performance should improve a bit because they'll be able to stream planets, moons, stations, things like objects in and out on the server and not just on our clients. So it is clearly like a very first step. And maybe it's not a baby step, it's kind of a big step, but it's not something to throw a party over just yet. Server-side OCS obviously requires iCache, which they've mentioned a few times now, and that's really like the full persistence thing. And the other thing that he mentioned that I hope I put in the clip was you're going to experiment, or they're going to experiment with server caps. They're not sure what they can get out of SOX in terms of server cap, but they're going to test it, they're going to try, and we're going to see. So maybe in Evocati or PTU, we'll kind of see what they can do with some server caps. And then he talks about probably the more important thing. This is the thing when you should probably start throwing confetti a little bit. I think this is what you think persistence is, a lot of people, and it is persistence, but persistence is like two things. It's like saving objects on your play session, but it's also things like saving our UEC purchases and stuff like that. So Chris goes into that a little bit.
So platform persistence is one other thing that we're putting in the 3.8, which is is basically a halfway house to the very full persistence, but the platform persistence is going to allow us to save off the alpha UEC that you've earned. Also, any items or ships that you've bought or rented in the game are going to... So they're going to get saved off to the platform in the same way that we record all your shop cash purchases. And so when a new release comes, we can re-entitle it back to the account in the same way we do for everything that you do. And the plan with that is to not have to wipe between iterative releases on a major release, and potentially even from one release to the next. And we do reserve the right if there's like a major issue or a major rebalance, or we have to redo the database on a major release, then at that particular time we may have to wipe it.
And this is exciting too. It's something that a lot of us want, and it's something that I have my concerns about. I think it'll kind of showcase how little the game actually has as far as gameplay in it if we have persistence for a long time. And I think they realize that too. And that's why they say, well, this kind of platform persistence is just so you don't get wipes in between like 3.7 and 3.8. So during the 3.7.1, 0.2, 0.3, whatever, that's where you won't get wipes. That's the plan with this platform persistence, which is coming in 3.8. And they reserve the right to wipe at any time because there may be some issues. And they also obviously said maybe between patches, and between a 3.8 and a 3.9, something like that. And it just kind of depends. But regardless, like the work this is moving towards something like flow persistence. So it's exciting regardless. But I don't want people to get like really worked up and then a wipe happen and just be super disappointed, because they're basically telling you that that's what's going to happen. And then he talks a little bit about Planet Tech V4, excuse me, where it means that they reworked every single planet and moon that took them 2 years to make in 2 months. That's how strong this kind of technology is, and that tells you their ability to scale. I think that's really the theme of this year's CitizenCon, is everything they're doing is to scale. It's to get the game to scale to what they promised, and this Planet Tech V4 is a big part of that. They also talked about new multi-part missions, and that's for 3.9 and onwards, and full persistence, which is slated for mid next year. And again, like the persistence that we talked about earlier, this isn't really related to your persistent game purchases and things like that. That's that platform persistence. This is your game persistence. This means that every item, every little speck of something that you could touch state will be saved. That includes people, ships, ground vehicles, everything, and that is the kind of confetti time. That's when the game really feels alive, and I think Chris goes on and explains the possibilities, but there's definitely some questions that come into play there with the things like finite resources. Like, since we don't have server meshing at the time, well, if I'm mining on a Daymar and you're mining the exact same node, does whoever finish it first gets it? Like, if there's finite resources, do they disappear on all servers? There's definitely some questions with that. So I imagine how Chris was explaining that as in the sense of like possibility. So once server meshing comes online, we can do finite resources really easily. That's what I take from that. Ultra exciting that's slated for mid next year. And then server meshing, this was the disappointing one, and I'll let you kind of listen.
And then the last thing, which we won't, I think, get to by the end of next year, but we'll be very close to it, is server meshing. And so everything we've been doing up until then, and that's when I think everything fully comes alive, is the server meshing allows us to have a lot more players in the same area.
So it won't be till the end of next year, which, I mean, has CIG ever really hit any marks on anything that they said they were going to do at CitizenCon? Not usually, so that's kind of disappointing that server meshing won't be till the end of next year, probably something like 2021, or 2020, excuse me, into 2021, which is rough, so that's disappointing. And then Chris kind of runs down a little bit more on quality of life, touches again on the fact that combat is important to them, and then more gameplay loops are planned to come in, like fueling, refueling, salvage, and just in general more content, more systems, star systems, that is, in the future. So all that tech that they talked about earlier is what leads into like the things that he talks about later on. Then after that talk, they get into the actual mission, and they start out with new mission locations, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I'll let you hear what they have to say about it.
And here's one of the things that I think Ian's talked about, we've talked about, is that we want to increase our range of, we have outposts, but they're pretty small. Correct. And we want to have points of interest that you would have in various planets or moons that you can have mission content in, things to do, and this is sort of this is a sort of first prototype of that.
Yeah, so basically multiple entries, multiple exits. Obviously with outposts, you got one way in, one way out. So for us, from a design standpoint, this allows us to build these in a modular way so that we can have different entrances, different exits, different room layouts, different mission content associated with it.
So these are like basically Outposts V2 is kind of how I look at it. It's a step up from Outposts where there's multiple entrances in, landing pads, and modularity, and from there they go to towns and villages. It's super, super exciting. Very excited for that, and very excited to have some missions at places like this on Microtech, and I think more that's along the lines of what they mean by the exterior of Microtech. Or New Babbage as far as what we will be getting in 3.8. Now for the rest of the video, guys, there's not too much that I want to talk to you about or want to show you, because I actually want you to take the time out and watch the keynote yourself. They show a mission, and it was a kind of they made the mission up. It wasn't actually a functioning mission, and it was somewhat disappointing to me. I'm not going to lie to you. And I don't want to really discuss it too much on today's show. I just really want to share you about the tech and the things that they showed on this panel. Maybe I'll do a video about like my opinions on it, or I'll finally upload Answer the Call on what we talked about it. So moving on, they talked about kind of the weather sim and how it's dynamic based on height and the atmosphere effects like humidity and temperature and things like that, and how that will play in to create weather, which is really cool. And then there was a pretty funny clip on what we can expect from melee combat in 3.8. Hilarious. And one of the last things that I want to show you is they really talked about the actor status system as part of this mission demo. So I'm going to do my best to cut it into as many pieces as possible and share that with you. So enjoy.
So what you're seeing here is basically an extension of the room system, and the room system contains temperature, wind speed, humidity, and it basically amalgamates all of that into what you're seeing on the HUD at the moment, which is the apparent temperature. So the apparent temperature actually comes in and is part of our player status system. And the player status system is where you start to feel these environments, and the actual environments start to play into the gameplay. So you can see here that actually the physicalized wind, he's actually leaning into the wind, he's putting his hand up to try and shield himself, but he's not wearing the correct attire. So he's not wearing the correct equipment, because he's just basically grabbed the clothes and jumped outside. And as you can see, it's really cold. So he's starting to shiver.
A bomb site here, it is.
Yeah, it's like
minus
120 degrees Celsius. So obviously, you can only survive at like at least 2-3 minutes in that temperature.
So we better get a warm suit on, because otherwise we're going to essentially pass out and then die.
So this suit is actually cold, so hopefully when Glenn puts it on, you'll see actually that it's actually frosted. So you can see your actor's actually shivering here as he's putting it on. And this suit is the Caldera suit that we revealed in the character archetype talk. And this is an environment suit that's built for these extreme climates. He's really cold. He's really cold.
All cool stuff there. The temperature was weird, like the negative 120 degrees C. I don't think they realized how cold that actually is. You would instantly die if you were in that temperature. So that's not that big of a deal. Obviously, they can adjust numbers. It doesn't really matter. But the way the actor acted when it was cold was really interesting. The shivering, all that stuff. It's so Star Citizen of them, right? I say that almost every week when we see updates, and that's just a very Star Citizen update. You know what I mean? And the last thing was the biggest thing, and it was wormhole travel. So I'm just gonna kind of let that play and cut it up a little bit where they explain things, but enjoy. It was cool. It's exciting.
And this is essentially sort of the infrastructure you occasionally would, you can have around. Some places would have bigger stations, But as I said, the pyro route isn't a very particularly well-traveled one.
But also with this, I guess with the cloud tech, you see the possibilities of us going in and mining that. And then it affecting your radar, it being booby-trapped, all these kind of gameplay possibilities, I feel, open up with these unique points of interest.
Do you guys think we should open it?
Yes.
I think we should go. Let's do it. That's actually a super cool view. You see that one?
Oh, yeah.
How good that is. That looks awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So going through a wormhole is a little bit like riding the rapids. You don't really have much. You have lateral control,
But it's
a little
it's
bit of
being on a
forward, but you're
current.
being pushed on a current,
Yeah.
and you've got to keep inside the boundaries of the wormhole. And actually, if Sam gets a little close, you'll sort of see interference on his screens. And of course, Stanton's just going away in the background, and Para's coming in here. Yeah, and you can see there's actually a current that we put in the wormholes, and you sort of see the particles that are giving you the idea of where the centerline current is. And you have to anticipate to keep on the course, because if you don't, and you go off and you go into the boundaries of the wormhole, you could end up just being spat out in just space in the middle of nowhere.
That's what we all expected from CitizenCon, was a wormhole. I like the idea of it being like a drain where water's going through, and you have to kind of navigate the whitewater raft that is the wormhole. I think it's a good mini game. I don't think it's a too involved mini game, and I like it. I think it's kind of on par with what I expected. I think when I was watching it, some people in Twitch chat didn't seem that excited about it, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty cool. Now, moving on to the actual panels that they showed this week, I guess this week, but at CitizenCon, I'm going to briefly go through a few bullet points on these, maybe show you some B-roll of what we're talking about, but these are the things that I plan on doing maybe a little bit more of a deep dive on. So the first one was called Terra Firma, and it was a panel about how they're going to make planets. It's the Planet Tech V4 panel. And the goal is to make it look more like Google Earth, which they did it. And they have a smoother transition with less popping in and out when entering and exiting a planet or moon. And this panel was pretty technical, but they did a good job on making it easy to understand. And yeah, I enjoyed this one. I think we'll probably go into this a little bit more later in the week. The next one was called MicroTechnicalities. And this was where they discussed how they made Microtech, and specifically more on New Babbage. But they start out with the stations, and the final concepts look really cool. They showed cargo concepts, they showed refinery concepts, and just another note here was that they straight up said that these modular stations and these outpost kind of stations that have the habs and everything will be around every single major planet. So kudos, that's awesome, super excited. And then they had a little kind of slide showing Microtech and its architecture, or all the places that we're going to be able to visit at it. And it's significantly more, I feel like, than the other cities. So You have the large building, you have open areas that you can land at and drive around, walk around, the city sprawl, which I assume is similar to the rooftop landings that we have at ArcCorp, and then domes. And domes are the interior spaces that we're probably going to get in 3.9 that we saw on Star Citizen, no, not Star Citizen Live, on Inside Star Citizen, maybe a few weeks or about a month ago. And that's kind of like the main area where I imagine things like the rental stuff will be, as well as, I don't know, shops like the gun shops and armor shops and things like that. That's where I expect to see those things. And then the next panel was Loremaker's Guide. And I don't normally watch these. I found it pretty interesting, actually, because they seem to dive a lot into the UEE lore, which seems like they're gearing up for Squadron 42 and kind of giving us all the information we need to know leading up to the story. Then they dropped a pretty big bomb. This is something they've been talking about for years now, and why they hired Sherry Heiberg, who we've seen on countless videos about the lore. They released the Galactapedia, and it's quite cool. It's basically a wiki, and yeah, I'm pretty excited to use it, and I had a fun time kind of scrolling around, and for the lore people, I think it'll be a lot of fun. It reminds me of the, I forgot the name of it in Mass Effect, like the Codex, where all the information was in there. And this Galactapedia will not only be on the website, it will also be in game. So it really kind of falls in line with that Mass Effect thing that I love to do. I loved to find out all the information about the aliens and everything, and then read about them in that Codex. Then the next one was Theater of War panel. It was called Shoot 'em Up, and it's basically a new game mode for Star Marine, or electronic access in general, because it kind of involves everything. There'll be 3 phases. It's a 20 versus 20 game mode that lasts about 30 minutes, and a lot of people got excited, but this is obviously going to have its issues. But the big thing was Sean Tracy's enthusiasm and Sean Tracy's honesty.
You know, the culture definitely at CIG is our visuals, but we have to be sure that we're fun too. And that map was really just white boxes. That was most of the time it was the same wall piece copied thousands of times all over the map just to get the placement of everything right. And we would switch it, we would move spawn points. So we iterated massively on it with tons of play testing. And again, you could do this when you're in a sort of 30-minute, 40-minute kind of mode where you could iterate on it in that way. And then once we got closer to CitizenCon, we're like, okay, now make it really beautiful, let's go. Right? And we've had maybe about a month and a half, 2 months of real solid art time on it now. And I need a little bit more. Just to make that to the level that you guys have come to expect of us, but we got to keep the performance up because, again, the gameplay has to come first with this particular mode.
Fun first, fidelity second. That's something I've wanted to see from Star Citizen, wanted to hear from Star Citizen for a long time, and kudos to Sean for finally saying it. It's super important, and I think I'll talk about this in a video on its own, because I think I can make like a 20-30 minute video on this subject itself. It's something that I feel very strongly about with Star Citizen, and I'm so happy to see this initiative. This is the most exciting thing, besides the Argo Mole, of course, that came out of Star Citizen for me. The next thing was a pretty close third, I guess, to that, and that's the TonyZ panel, and it was called Building a Dynamic Universe. And I think a lot of people thought this was epic, and if you haven't seen it yet, you should really check it out. It basically shows a tool that the economy is using to make a dynamic universe, and it runs on a dedicated server, and it's web-based, which is really amazing. So this Turbulent has to have something to do with this. And it basically simulates the life of NPCs, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And what they do is they're creating jobs for them, so factories and nodes to mine and things like that. It was very simple for what it needs to be in the future, but the demo was quite amazing and exciting, and it goes in line with that theme that I talked about earlier, scale. This is a tool that allows them to scale the economy of the universe, and it's super, super exciting. And this is one that I definitely want to do a kind of side video on this week if I have time. And then finally, the miscellaneous updates throughout the week that we had. The C8 Pisces came out, and if you owned a Carrack, you got the C8. or you could buy the C8X Pisces, which the C8 is supposed to have 2 hard points, but in game it has 4 hard points, but just 2 guns. And the C8X should have 4 hard points, as well as some modularity. I think somebody spoke to somebody out there and let me know that. I don't think there's any like solid written down information about that yet, but hopefully we'll see the ship panel soon. Now, the hardpoint dilemma or drama is cleared up now. So there was a post saying the C8 is only supposed to have 2 hardpoints, and the difference between the two and the reason for the $20 upgrade is that the C8X will have 4 hard points. The C8 will only have 2. It's a bug, it's an error, and it will get fixed. They also added a new player hub, which is on their website. It is very useful, very cool. If you're a new player watching this video and you got this far, I'm surprised. But check it out for yourselves. If you have any friends that you want to share Star Citizen with, this is a good place to send them. And then some info on limited ships. So if you're thinking about buying any ships at the United Aerospace Expo, we have some information on when those limited ships will go on sale. So 9 a.m. Eastern and 14 UTC, 3 p.m. Eastern and 20 UTC, as well as lastly 9 p.m. Eastern and 2 UTC. So 9 a.m. was the first one. It'll be on screen, but I may have spoke wrongly there. And speaking of the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, as of today, we've had 2 expos. We've had Anvil and RSI, and I would say they're quite disappointing in comparison to last year's. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, but basically nothing new besides the Pisces, and we saw the Pisces at the event, so it wasn't super exciting. Last year, we had ships that we've never seen before, and we couldn't even fly, but we can look at, and I don't know, I thought that was really awesome. But this year, what's really telling is I think the ship people don't have the time to work on that stuff, and they need to work on Squadron 42. So this is just one of those things where, yeah, it's a little bit disappointing, but it just shows what the priorities are. And the priorities aren't on the Expo as much this year as they were last year, because Squadron 42 is the focus this year. So, guys, that's going to wrap up a very long video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to do my best to edit it down and keep it as clean as possible. Let me know in the comments below. Definitely hit that like button for the effort. I haven't slept much since CitizenCon started. And yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for all the love and thank you for everything. So hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, comment below. Let me know what you guys thought, and I'll see you guys next week.